Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I just want to apologize for the delay. I was just having some technical issues and hopefully it's resolved. My camera was freezing. But yes, hopefully you guys can hear me. And welcome. I am so excited to be here today. So thank you so much to the Florida Jamaat for having me on. And I'm going to be speaking on healthy eating for South Asians. So just a breakdown of what's going to happen within the hour. I'm going to be doing a quick PowerPoint presentation. I didn't want it to be technical, but there's just a lot of information that I just wanted to relate to you guys. So it's just easier to understand through a PowerPoint. And then the remaining of the presentation, you'll just be seeing me, and I'm going to be doing 2 cooking demos. So let's get started. So the PowerPoint, I'm just waiting for that to load up. Perfect. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to start off with this quote from Surah Baqarah. Eat of the good things which we have provided for you. And this is a little bit more on my philosophy on healthy eating and nutrition. So eating foods that have been provided for us, that's found in its natural form, so whole foods. And there's so much reason for this. You know, these are foods that nourish us, they're good for us, and they really help with disease prevention, which you will learn more about as I go on. So next slide, please. And just a little bit about myself. So I'm a registered dietitian. I have a master's in public health. I'm also a certified diabetes educator, and working in diabetes was really where I really fully understood how powerful food can be in our health. So with diabetes, as you know, there's no cure for it. And our diet and our exercise, our lifestyle is a form of medication. So it's very powerful. I'm also a clinical dietitian at the MedCan Clinic in Toronto, and I'm a virtual dietitian, which I see clients all across the globe, and I specialize in diabetes, heart disease, hormone health, as well as weight loss. I do recipe and menu development, and I also host cooking workshops as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so South Asians. So when we hear the term South Asians, what does that mean exactly? So there's about 7 countries that encompass, India and the surrounding countries. So that is people who are South Asians are from Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So during the presentation, I'm going to be referring to South Asians, and this is who I am referring to, the people from these countries. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some quick statistics on South Asians. So South Asians make up 1/4 of the world's population. However, they account for over 60% of the world's heart disease patients. So just think about that for a second. That is pretty crazy, right? So we are, a minority, but yet we have over half of the world heart disease statistics. So there's more than 2 million South Asians that live in the U.S. and almost 1 million in Canada. And South Asians are one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in the U.S. So there is a 3 to 5-fold increase in risk for heart disease and cardiovascular death compared to other ethnic groups. So South Asians have significantly higher rates of diabetes, about 23%, versus other ethnic groups. And I've listed them here. So 6% in non-Hispanic whites, 18% in African American, 17% in Latinos, and 13% in Chinese Americans. So we really are the highest group. Next slide, please. So the diabetes risks. So this just a simple graph that just highlights the South Asians versus other ethnic groups. So in America, the disease prevalence rate, so in dark is the South Asians. So we can see in different countries, South Asians are always the highest when it comes to diabetes risk. So despite South Asians having a leaner body type than other ethnic groups, we have twice the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes also promotes heart disease and stroke. So when you have type 2 diabetes, your risk for heart disease is also higher. Next slide, please. So when I talk about cardiovascular disease, I'm referring to blood pressure, dyslipidemia, which is cholesterol, so low HDL levels, this is our protective cholesterol. So we always want our HDL to be high, but South Asians have a tendency to have low HDL. High HDL, and this is like our bad cholesterol, so we want our LDL to be as low as possible, and high triglycerides. So triglycerides is a type of fat that's not metabolized in our body. So we have fat droplets floating in our blood, which is very dangerous. So we want to keep that as low as possible. And lastly, inflammation. So people who have or at risk for cardiovascular disease tend to have high homocysteine levels and C-reactive protein. So these are all measures that can be tested in your blood, which your doctor will go over with you. But keep in mind that being South Asian, we are all at risk for all of this. Next slide, please. So just another graph that shows male and female out of different Asian groups. So we see that Asian Indians have, not only do they have a higher rate of heart disease, but they actually have it at a much earlier age. It's about 10 years earlier than other ethnic groups that develop heart disease. So we can see both in male and female that we have that trend. Next slide, please. Okay, so metabolic syndrome. So this is just a cluster of symptoms that people can experience, and it's usually diagnosed with having a waist circumference higher than 90 centimeters for male and higher than 80 centimeters for female. And this has been adjusted for South Asians, actually. So having a bigger midsection, plus a combination of two of the following. So either you have high blood pressure, high fasting blood sugar, or insulin resistance, high triglyceride levels, or low levels of the good cholesterol, the HDL. So if you have a waist circumference that's higher than that, plus the other two, you technically have metabolic syndrome, okay? And South Asians just have a higher rate of developing metabolic syndrome compared to other ethnic groups. Next slide, please. So right now you may be wondering, well, why are South Asians have this predisposition? And it's really interesting. There was a study done in America, which is called the Masala study, which stands for atherosclerosis in South Asians living in America. And this is the first study of its kind that's a longitudinal study in the U.S. So we can better understand why or what factors lead South Asians to be at such a risk for heart disease, and how we can prevent that. So what the study has found is that there is a genetic predisposition. Okay, South Asians have a greater tendency to store visceral fat versus subcutaneous fat. So I'm just going to explain that quickly. So visceral body fat is fat that's actually deep in it's surrounding our organs. And subcutaneous fat is fat just underneath the skin. So because South Asians have a higher tendency to store visceral body fat, that just makes it dangerous. So we have this fat that is surrounding our important organs, such as our liver, our heart, our kidneys, and it just makes it harder for our organs to work efficiently when we have this type of body fat. And South Asians, there's been a lot of studies on South Asians, which are known to be skinny fat. So we tend to be leaner, and smaller frame, but our body fat is much higher around our organs. And this is what makes it so dangerous. And there are studies done, actually there was a Canadian study done on babies, and they were looking at South Asian when they were born, and they actually, even though they weighed less, the way their fat was distributed was more concentrated around their midsection. So they're already at a higher risk for the visceral body fat. So when we have this extra fat, particularly around our midsection, because that's where all our organs are stored, right? It's all in the middle. This increases insulin resistance. Now, what insulin resistance is, it means that you have to provide more insulin. So our pancreas is what stores insulin. And when our body has sugar in it or carbohydrates, the insulin responds by picking up that blood sugar and distributing it to the cells that need energy, okay? So because there's so much resistance on that cell because of the extra body fat, it's hard for insulin to do its job properly. So next slide, please. So with this study, it's been very useful, and it has helped with guidelines, with national guidelines. So the American Diabetes Association has issued their guidelines and updated them in 2015. So it actually took into consideration South Asians, and usually a body or BMI index of 25 or higher is regarded as being overweight. And they've actually lowered it for South Asians to take into account this smaller frame, but more body fat around the waist. So the BMI now is 23. Also, the American Heart Association and other medical groups have updated their cholesterol guidelines. And for the first time, now doctors are, for the last few years, maybe your doctor has talked to you about your ethnicity and in determining your cardiovascular risk and your treatment options. So in this study, it was very interesting in that people who participated in this study were from San Francisco and Chicago. And 40% of the South Asians that participated in this were vegetarian. And, in the Western world, vegetarian is seen as like the healthy alternative. And it is, but with South Asians who eat traditionally vegetarian South Asian foods like fried snacks, sweetened beverages, high-fat dairy, were found to have worse cardiovascular health, which is really interesting. And they also found that South Asians who followed like the standard American diet were also at risk. So the group of South Asians that were kind of at moderate risk or low risk were ones that, yes, follow the South Asian diet, but also took into account healthier eating principles. So kind of in between. So not someone who follows a traditional diet and not someone who follows like a standard American diet. Hopefully that makes sense. And also, yes, if you guys have any questions, please post them and I will try to answer them at the end. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to explain what insulin resistance is because this is so important for us to know. So over at the top, you'll see a normal cell, and you see the red is the sugar. So this is carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates that's broken down in simplest form is glucose. So we have glucose floating in our blood, and then we have insulin in the blue. So what insulin does, it acts like a chaperone, and it picks up that sugar that's floating in our bloodstream, and it escorts it into the cell. So there's these receptors, insulin receptors. So you can see that the insulin attaches to the receptor, and it's like a gate that allows it to open, and the sugar molecules go down. So therefore, when the sugar goes into our cell, that's used for energy, right? That's used for us to function. Now, in an insulin-resistant cell, you'll see a lot of glucose. See, there's a lot more sugar floating in our blood. Insulin is still there, but the receptors, they're not able to bind to the receptor, so they're not able to open that gate to let the sugar go in. And this is problematic because insulin resistance can lead to being overweight because that sugar, all that excess blood sugar, is just floating in our blood and it's getting stored as fat and sent to the liver. And then insulin resistance, because we're not getting that energy, can make us feel tired, it can make us feel weak, it can make us feel hungry, and then we tend to overeat, and then this whole cycle starts again. So this is the problem. So I really wanted you guys to understand this, and hopefully this this table or this graphic explains that, because I think this is such an important point. So next slide, please. Okay, so maybe you're wondering what causes insulin resistance, and there's a variety of factors. So what we talked about being, from a certain ethnic group, and South Asians have the highest resistance towards this, but we're not the only ones. So there's Africans, there are people from Native backgrounds, Hispanic, and Pacific Islanders. Being overweight, that's definitely a risk factor for insulin resistance. Again, especially if you're carrying a lot of your weight in the midsection. A sedentary lifestyle, so not getting enough exercise. Also, if you're on certain medications, such as steroids, that could lead to insulin resistance as well. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, that's a big risk factor as well as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the clinic that I work at, people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, I mean, there's so many people that I see in the last, 7 to 10 years that this is so common that I'm seeing that people who have a lot of fat around their liver. People also with Hep C And our diet, right? So remember that diagram that I showed you, the table before, about the sugar molecules in our blood? So the foods that we choose to eat that have a high glycemic index, meaning that it turns to sugar really quickly. As soon as we ingest it, it turns to sugar. So foods that score high glycemic index, so I'm talking about white rice, white bread, if we have a lot of that, it's overtaxing our insulin, as well as foods that are high in saturated fat, diets that are low in fiber and low in omega-3, so they tend to have higher resistance to insulin. And then also family history, right? So if there's a family history of diabetes or gestational diabetes, there's a further risk for having insulin resistance. And again, age, and this is something we can't control either. So over the age of 40 or 45, as we get older, our organs also age, and so they're not working as efficiently. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Next slide, please. So the South Asian lifestyle. 100%. So yes, we know that South Asians have a predisposition in the way our body is formed. We're at risk, but our lifestyle also is such a huge factor in our disease prevention, right? And with the studies that have been done, and they found that children as aged young as 10 to 14 had early markers of insulin resistance, which is a precursor for type 2 diabetes. Environmental factors such as a poor diet or smoking further increases this genetic risk. So diet, again, like I mentioned, high saturated fat, processed foods, high carbohydrates, sweetened beverages, this just escalates the risk further. And with South Asians, it's been found or studied, physical activity is crucial, yet there's so many, specifically South Asian women, who do not get the recommended amount of physical activity in their daily life. So all of this also contributes to our risk. Next slide, please. So you may be thinking, what are we supposed to do? We're just doomed, right? Not necessarily. There's many factors that are definitely against us, right? Our family history, our ethnicity, even our age. We can't control these factors. But we need to really do our best in controlling or focusing on what we can control. So our diet, our exercise, how we handle stress, and smoking. So lifestyle is so important. So being South Asian, yes, there's so many factors against us. And I don't want you to look at this and be like, oh, okay, well, there's no point. There is. There's so much you can do that you have control over, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So next slide. So some of the drawbacks of the South Asian cuisine, right? So our diet can be very heavy, right? There's certain dishes like biryani or a lot of meat dishes that are just heavy and also rich, high in saturated fat. An example is butter chicken. And also fried food. The amount of fried food that comprises South Asian dishes, such as samosas, bhajiyas, pakoras, kebabs, these all contribute to the saturated fat issue. And carb heavy. We have, rice, naan, parathas, mandazis, all these foods that are really high in carbohydrates. So we really need to be careful. And also high sugar. So India is actually the highest consumption of sugar out of everyone in the world. And mainly our desserts, are filled with tons of sugar, the Indian sweets, and also drinks as well. So these are some of the drawbacks that we really need to be careful. And I'm not suggesting for anyone to, completely eliminate these foods out of their diet, but we just really need to be careful. So next slide, please. So some of the benefits with South Asian cuisine, there's a lot of great benefits with our food. South Asian food is popular for its diversity, it's the variety of dishes, the spices, the dishes or the spices that are used. South Asian foods are very nutrient dense, and there are foods that support our immune system, our brain function, as well as fight inflammation. So, South Asian dishes are rich in herbs and spices. And as you guys know, turmeric has been extensively studied and its benefit and role in fighting inflammation. But there's so many other spices as well, and herbs like ginger, garlic, all of this which is such a huge component in South Asian dishes, that science has actually confirmed that. Next slide, please. So just some healthy swaps to keep in mind. If you're using margarine, which is a man-made product, it's chemically altered, it's best to switch to olive oil or even butter in moderation. So white rice, I know this is a staple in our diet, and it's really has to do with how much we're having. But we can always switch or combine a mix of brown rice or even cauliflower rice. I'm not sure if any of you have tried that. It's actually really good. Some people love it on their own, and you can mix it with white rice to increase the volume, or even quinoa or brown rice. And then our naans, like white bread, and our naans and our paratha to sprouted or multi-grain varieties. And if you're someone who makes your own rotis, you can always add in a whole grain mix. You can add in millet, oat, spelt, flaxseed, like milled flaxseed powder. That's always a great addition. You can just decrease your flour by 1/4 cup and add in flax powder. And that's a great way to boost the nutrients and to boost the fiber in your food. Next slide, please. So some other suggestions for healthy swaps. So in place of using heavy cream, sour cream in dishes, or full-fat yogurt, switching to a low-fat yogurt, such as a Greek yogurt or skyr yogurt, is an excellent option. Again, you're getting lower saturated fat, and you're getting more protein with a Greek or skyr yogurt. And then our treats, right? Our sweets that we have, like burfi, jalebi, gulab jamun, those are a huge concentrated source of sugar. So even just swapping that to fresh fruit or fruit salads, these are such a natural way for us to enjoy food. And they're sweet as well. And then our drinks, right? So soda, pop, commercial fruit juice, switching that, because that's such a concentrated amount of sugar. So switching that to water, sparkling water, or fruit spritzers. So just being really careful on where what the foods are that are coming into our diet. We want to have a majority of our food coming from whole food sources and less on the highly processed ones. Next slide, please. And healthier cooking. Cooking Indian food can be very oily, but it doesn't have to be. So being mindful. And a good rule of thumb that I like to tell people is that, try to use 1 tablespoon of oil when you're cooking a pound of food. So whether it's a pound of chicken, a pound of meat, pound of vegetables, so you want to aim for 1 tablespoon of oil. You want to invest in some really good cookware that's nonstick. Le Creuset is great. You want to decrease the frequency of red meat to twice a week and choose leaner sources. This is really big. So red meat is it's a great source of protein, but it does contain saturated fat. And saturated fat comes from foods from an animal source. Okay, so I'm not saying for everyone to become vegetarian at all. I'm just saying that we want to reduce the frequency of our animal intake and kind of round it out with more plant-based foods or leaner sources such as fish. So we should be aiming to have fish at least twice a week. And it's the fish that live in cold water that have those protective omega-3 benefits that we need to fight inflammation. And deep frying. So foods that are deep fried obviously are a source of saturated fat or high fat. And, there's so many great options now with air frying. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, I'm always using my ActiFry, and it's such a fantastic tool to even have some of our traditional foods, but using the ActiFry, which is minimal amount of oil, and you still achieve like a crispy taste to it. So that's a great option. The Instant Pot, I'm also a huge fan of that. It's such a great way, especially cooking South Asian dishes. I find the Instant Pot is amazing for that. It saves time, and it's a healthy way to cook as well. And we want to have more plant-based protein in our diet. So lentils and beans at least 1 to 2 times a week. So, for us in my family, like Mondays, I usually have like meatless Monday. So this is the day where I would typically have, a lentil dish for the family. And that's been working out nicely. So I know at least 1 day a week we have that, and maybe a few times during the week. And then we want to try to be mindful of our oil intake, and you want to marinate your foods in yogurt, spices, and herbs. And these are all natural, really great ways to give flavor to your food. And when it comes to cooking oils, olive oil and avocado oil are excellent. They're both a high source of monounsaturated fat, which is really good for heart health. And olive oil has been extensively studied, and there's so much research behind the benefits of olive oil. Now, a lot of people get confused because they feel they can't really cook with it because of its smoke point, but really you can. It's just the long, heavy, intense cooking over a long duration of time that we don't want to use olive oil. So then we can use something like avocado oil, which is a stronger oil with a higher smoke point. But just as a reference, cooking, sauteing, or even making an egg on the stove with olive oil is absolutely okay to do. So this is the end of the PowerPoint presentation. I just wanted to give you guys like a big, or just an understanding, because so many people that I speak with, always tell me, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I just don't do it. And I just feel that if you have a better understanding why South Asians are at the risk that they are, how our body type is built, maybe that will help you make better choices as you eat. So right now I'm going to be showing you 2 plant-based dishes, which are really delicious. So the takeaway is that I'm not encouraging anyone to become vegetarian if you don't want to. You don't need to give up meat or animal foods, but you really want to have a well-rounded diet. So yes, you can include meat and chicken and all that, but you want to make sure your vegetable intake is high, because the vegetables contain those nutrients, the fiber. So fiber is so important when it comes to blood sugar management and insulin resistance. What happens is when we consume foods that have fiber in it, there's less of a spike in our blood sugar. So fiber kind of acts like it suppresses that spike. So foods that are high in fiber are going to be good for us. We're not going to be taxing our insulin. It's not going to be overloading our body. So where do you get fiber from? So fiber is found in the plant world. So it's found in fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans and lentils, and whole grains. So we always really want to make sure when we're having any meal or even a snack, we want to really make sure we're getting in fiber. So the 2 dishes I'm going to be showing you, one of them is a chaat. It's like a salad, which I'm sure many of you have tried. And the second one I'm going to be showing you is tandoori cauliflower bites. And cauliflower is one of those amazing vegetables that really can do it all. It's non-starchy, so it's very low in carbohydrate, really high in fiber, and tons of nutrients. So it's really important that we try to get these vegetables in our diet. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let me bring that here. Let me get one more thing. Okay, so what I've done here is this is half of a cauliflower. So this is, I already cooked the other half earlier, so I can show you what that looks like. So this is half cauliflower. They're just in florets, like so. And so cauliflower is a really great replacement for potatoes and rice. So I don't know if you guys have ever tried cauliflower rice, but you can buy them at the grocery store. They're packaged and they're just in like they look like rice, and you just cook that up. I actually have a really good recipe on like a spiced cauliflower rice that takes into account like all the spices, that we use in our cooking, and it has a really great flavor. So again, cauliflower is very mild, and it really takes on the flavor of other foods. Okay, so this is the cauliflower. So to this, I've already prepped everything. I'm going to be using a 1/4 cup of low-fat yogurt, low-fat Greek yogurt. And to this, I've added a little bit of avocado oil, about half a tablespoon. And I'm using avocado oil because I'm going to be cooking it at a temperature around 400. So typically, if it's under 400, I would use olive oil, but if it's above that, I would definitely use an avocado oil. So I have avocado oil and yogurt in here. And then with my spices, I have 1 tablespoon of tandoori powder. I have a little bit of turmeric, about half a teaspoon of turmeric. So turmeric is amazing. The more we can include turmeric in our diet, the better it is for us. Now, one thing to keep in mind with turmeric though, In order for our body to absorb the turmeric for its anti-inflammatory properties, we want to include a little bit of black pepper. So I have some, I don't know if you guys can see that, I have some black pepper in here as well. So black pepper increases the bioavailability of turmeric so we can actually reap those benefits. So whenever you're cooking with turmeric, try to also add in a little bit of black pepper. Okay, so I'm going to put it in here and then I'm going to bake it. So, and also, both these recipes are on my website. So it's just at anarallidina.com. So I'm going to add my yogurt and avocado to the cauliflower. And to this, I'm going to be adding my spice mix. So right in here. I'm going to give this a stir. I'm going to need to use my hands to mix this all in, but they're clean. I did wash them. And I'm going to make sure these are all well coated. So this is what it looks like right now. And I mean, this is the same marinade that you would use for chicken as well. Thanks, Layla. And you know, Eid is coming up. We're going to be meeting family. So these two dishes would be amazing complements to like a traditional biryani dinner that many people will be having. So again, you don't need to cut meat out completely. You just want to decrease the frequency, and you want to make sure you're rounding it out with a lot of other plant-based foods. So this would be a great side. I actually used, to make this recipe, I used a cauliflower steak. So I just cut the cauliflower in slices, and I used it on the barbecue, but I like it much better this way in the oven in small pieces. Okay, I'm just making sure everything's coated before I transfer it. And I will be answering questions after. Let me see if I'll answer any right now. So I have a question here. What is a healthy snack to eat when you are hungry between meals? Great question. So a great snack that's also plant-based and whole food for me, or for anyone I would suggest, would be a piece of fruit, like an apple or any kind of fruit that you like. But if you're on the go, you know, an apple, a pear, those are such portable snacks to carry with you, but then also having a bit of protein with that. So a protein source, a plant-based protein source would be some nuts, like almonds are great. Almonds out of all nuts contain the most fiber because of the skin. Now, if you have a nut allergy, then you can use pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are fantastic, a great source of tons of nutrients, as well as protein as well. So you want to combine your carbohydrate with a protein that has fiber in it, that doesn't have that spike in our blood sugars. So fruit, some nuts. If you don't like nuts or seeds, you could do a piece of cheese, like a cheese stick as well. So hopefully that answered the question. Okay. So this is ready to go in the oven. I need to wash my hands, but this is what it looks like. It's just marinated cauliflower. Kind of looks like chicken, right? So this goes in the oven for 400 for 25 minutes. And for the last few minutes, I like to just broil it at 450, just so it has like a nice crispy coating. So I'm gonna put this here. I'm just gonna wash my hands. Okay, so I used half of a cauliflower head, and I made the other half earlier today so you guys can see what it looks like, so you don't have to wait for it to cook. So here it is. Let me adjust my camera. So this is what it looks like, and I just put a little bit of cilantro on here, and you can use a squeeze of fresh lemon, and this is like a great appetizer to have, and it's really hearty. And if you're serving it, if people are coming over, just some toothpicks, and there you go. Okay, so these are tandoori cauliflower bites. And again, if you want the recipe, it is on my website, anarallidina.com. So that's one dish. So the next dish I'm going to be showing you is the chaat, and my hands are stained from the tandoori and the turmeric, but it'll come out. All right, so let me show you that one. So let me answer another question that I have here while I set up. Would homemade ghee be better than butter? That's a great question. Yes. So homemade ghee is amazing. It does have a better nutrient profile than butter alone because the liquid has been separated from the solids. So you're left with like, a product very clear that doesn't have lactose actually in it. So it's a great way to make your own ghee is from butter, and it separates. So then you just strain the liquid portion into a jar, and that can last you for, a few months or a few weeks, depending how often you use it. Now, ghee is also, it is a fat, so you want to be mindful of the portions that you're using as well. So you can't just go crazy with it. You want to be mindful, but that would be a great option instead of using. Or in addition, you can vary depending on what you're cooking. Some dishes, like the cauliflower or spiced cauliflower recipe that I have on my website, I do use a little bit of ghee, and it just adds so much flavor to it, and it's super delicious. And also, I do have a recipe of ghee as well that you can find. So definitely, yeah, ghee would be a great option versus butter. Let me get one more thing. Okay, so this next dish that I'm going to be making is a chaat. And this is just like an Indian salad, which is rich with spices, and it's so delicious. It's one of my favorite things. And again, like I said, Eid is coming up. So if you are having biryani, having this would be a great addition to the meal, like a great starter. So to this, I'm going to be adding, oh, you guys can't see this, sorry. I have 3 cups of chickpeas, and you can use cooked chickpeas, which the Instant Pot is amazing to do and very efficient. So I have 3 cups of chickpeas in here. Now I also have 1 cup of boiled potatoes that I've diced. You can completely omit the potato if you want. If you're watching your blood sugars, this would taste great on its own without the potato. But I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. Now, so garbanzo beans, this is the white chickpeas, but then there's also the smaller, darker ones, the black chickpeas. Now, nutritionally, they do differ slightly. The black ones actually have more fiber, less fat. So the garbanzo beans, the white chickpeas, they're more creamier in taste and has a higher fat content. The black ones are just as delicious, but it does have less fat and more fiber. So this would be a great option that you can swap in here if you wanted to increase your fiber intake. So it has a lower glycemic index. So again, remember, we want to try to eat foods that have a low glycemic index. And garbanzo beans are great too. They have fiber, but the little small darker ones have more. Okay, so I'm gonna add the potato. And to this, I'm going to be adding my vegetables. So here I have some red onion. I have a green chili as well that I've chopped up. I have cilantro, cucumbers, and tomatoes, which I've seeded. So I've just taken like the seed and the watery parts out so the salad doesn't get soggy. So all my veggies are here. So I'm going to throw this in. And this dish is super filling. So you can have this as like, even for like a lunch. is just super hearty because of the chickpeas. It's just very filling. And again, we want to try to have more lentils and beans in our diet because they have all that good fiber. And the fiber, yes, it's so important for our digestion, for our gut health, to help with cravings, and it really helps with reducing the sugar spikes in our body. So I'm going to mix this guy in here. And I'm going to make the dressing now. And the dressing is really simple. There's no oil. There's just some herbs, some lemon. Already this looks so colorful and pretty. So for the dressing, okay, so I have a 1/4 cup of tamarind sauce, and this is just a sweet, tangy sauce. You do want to be careful again with how much you're using because there is sugar in here, but about a tablespoon has 4 grams of sugar. So I have a 1/4 cup in here. So to this, I'm going to use a lemon, the juice of 1 lemon. Okay. And I got another question here, is that can you forward us the chart? Yes, so I think that can be done. The Florida Jamaat has the PowerPoint, so if they wanted to share that, that's fine. I'm using the fresh herbs, lemon, and spices. Such a great way to flavor your food. Okay. Now I'm going to add the spices, and I've already prepped everything. So in here I have 2 teaspoons of chaat masala. I have a little bit of salt, just very little, some cumin powder, and then I'll have some amchur powder, which is just dried green mango powder, and just adds so much flavor. So I'm going to put this into the dressing. I'm going to give this a mix. Sorry, my daughter is just giving me the questions that you guys are asking. So thank you for asking such good questions. So I have another question here. Can we use white sweet potato instead of a normal potato for healthy cooking? Yeah, so right. So question with sweet potato versus a regular white potato. So yes, so sweet potatoes, are a starch. They do have carbohydrate, but they do contain more fiber than a regular white potato, and more minerals. So you can definitely swap that for a regular potato, but again, keep in mind the portions because it's still a starchy vegetable. And if you're someone who's really mindful or watching your sugar intake or have insulin resistance, you do need to be careful with the portion, but that would be great. Typically, any vegetable that's orange or green contain the most nutrients in terms of their vitamin content. And these vitamins just really help support our cellular health as well. So it's really important that we try to include that. Okay, so I gave this a mix. So this is the dressing, and I'm just going to pour it over the salad. And this just needs to sit in the fridge for about 30 minutes for everything to settle nicely. And I might not even put all of it in, depending. I'll adjust. So if I need more, I'm going to give this a mix. And this is such a great salad to have in the winter. If you're having a barbecue, this would be a great one to add. And I might not even use all the dressing. Yeah, I don't think I will. Maybe before serving, I'll add a little bit more on the side if anyone needs to add. And this is it. This is the salad. This is the chaat. Now, this is totally optional, but if you did want to make it a little bit fancy, you could add a little bit of a bell mix to this to give it that crunch. or you can just leave it on the side for anyone who would want to include it in. That would be a good idea as well. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but here it is. There's vegetables, there's some potato, chickpeas, so you're getting all that fiber, all that good stuff in here. And just for serving, you can throw on a little bit of that mix that I was talking about. And you can also garnish it with a little bit more cilantro. So this is another dish. And again, the recipe can be found on my website. Everything is posted there. So there you go. So I showed you 2 recipes, that have the nutrients that we need to help balance our blood sugars, to help with, how our food is broken down in our body. So again, high fiber foods. So we have the chaat and the cauliflower, Tandoori bites as well. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any other questions, you can let me know. I would love to hear from you, so you can connect with me as well. You can email me. My website is anarallidina.com. You can follow me on Instagram, where I regularly post recipes and other health tips. And thank you so much for joining. And I'm so sorry again with the technical issues that we had earlier, but hopefully there were no glitches with the video. So thanks so much, guys.